I watched Biden and make the announcement that, yes, he's going to choose a black woman to be on the Supreme Court. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. And so Biden says, I made a campaign agreement that I'm going to choose a black woman to be on the Supreme Court. I'm going to follow through with that. So it's going to be a black woman. Now, he hasn't nominated anybody yet, so he might turn around and nominate somebody else, right? I don't know, but probably he's not going to. Those of you who may recall a very important conservative Republican in the United States named Ronald Reagan made a campaign pledge that he was going to nominate a woman to the Supreme Court. A similar kind of thing. And people were like, oh, nominate a woman. And he did, right? So I was thinking about this. I'm like, okay, he's going to nominate a black woman. Like, okay, cool. Right? Well, a lot of people, you can imagine the blowback on it. A lot of people talking about it. It's like, what do we think about this? Is this some kind of a affirmative action I'm not really comfortable with? Or how do I think? So I thought, how do I think about this? So I'm gonna walk you through my thought process. I think it's fine. So I'm going to start right there. I think it's perfectly fine. But I'm not certain it's fine. And there are people in this classroom who also have some really interesting ideas and thoughts and probably would disagree that maybe it's not such a good idea and to say outright in the beginning that this is what you're going to do and that sort of thing. Let me just start with this idea of filling a position, okay? First off, for the vast majority of positions, there are hundreds and thousands, and sometimes tens of thousands of people who would be eligible to fill that position and could do it reasonably well. Could do it very well, right? So we're immediately thinking, as soon as we think about filling positions, we always think about the best person for the job, right? Isn't that what you talk about, right? You're thinking okay, I want to prove myself to be the best. That's why I want a high GPA, and I'm going to pad my resume with all sorts of stuff, which mostly, by the way, is nonsensical and nobody really cares. But nonetheless, we do it anyway, and we're told to do that, and we want to look really good, and we want to show someone we're the best possible person for the job, even before they've ever talked to us, okay? So, but there are so many people that could do the job. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you're never going to get the best, because first off, you can never know what the best person is, because there's so many people who could do most any job. You take my job here, right? First off, any knucklehead could do my job, but I think back to me when I first started teaching this class. I technically, I don't know what it means to be qualified. I didn't have a PhD. I was writing my dissertation. Okay, I was 31 years old. I had never had a class in race relations in all my life, which means nothing because you all are having a class. In 2 years from now, if I ask you what you remember from this class, there will be nothing. Maybe you'll remember my green shirt, or maybe you'll remember that I carried beads around, but you won't remember anything else other than that. So okay, that doesn't really matter, but I never had a class in race relations. I was teaching it. So I stand up in front of about 150 students over in Waring Commons back in the fall of 1991, and I start talking about U.S. race and ethnic relations, which is what the class was. They hired me just because they didn't have anybody else to teach the class. And that the person who was going to teach it just decided they didn't want to teach it at the last minute. They needed somebody, and they're like, the guy's like, yeah, you'll do fine, you're good, right? I'm like, all right, I guess, here I go, right? But so many people were a more quote-unquote qualified. I don't even know what it means to be qualified to teach a class, right? But I did fine. My class reviews came back at the end of the semester, end of semester evaluations came back. They were really positive across the board. I was teaching mostly an extraordinary high volume of white men who were going to be police officers, right? Back then, that's how it worked. And so they came back really positive. So I'm like, well, okay, according to them, I did a pretty reasonable job, right? But when I think back to what I knew then and what I know now, I was an idiot. I was completely unqualified. I was out of my game. I was out of the zone. There's no way I should have been teaching that class at all because I was 31 years stupid, right? I was really, I can't tell you how much of a knucklehead that I was at that point in time, but nonetheless, I did fine. But back then, would have been, according to who were at my level, there were probably 100,000 people in the United States who could have taught this class. Now, with my experience at it, okay, that number's down a little bit, but there are lots and lots of people who could teach the class. So it's like, but who's the best? Who would be the best? Who would be most qualified? Okay, I don't know. So in some ways, we're just picking people, right? To be really clear, you're just grabbing people and you're putting them in positions. You get a job?
Yeah.
Where'd you work?
At a restaurant.
Were you qualified for it? Was it fun?
No. Well, I wasn't qualified, but then I was after I started. They trained me.
They trained you, right?
Yeah.
And then it was fine. Wasn't that difficult?
No.
Okay. And how about you,
I've
Megan?
had like 3 jobs.
Yeah?
Or 4.
And were you qualified for any of them before you started?
I was qualified for not my first job, but my second job.
Your second job?
Because of my first job.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, and you're going to find pretty much throughout your lives, both of you, that's going to be kind of how it is always. Because there's nothing, unless you're like really in a very narrow major in Penn State, like accounting or something, I don't know, even engineering, like mostly you just learn stuff you learn it on the job. Like you just get in and you learn, and that's where we go, right? So you're going to find that throughout your lives, especially if you're like a sociology major or something, okay? So, all right, so you're basically just, so you got to fill the job. You can just, what do you want to do? You can just interview a huge range of unknown people, but just like the two of you came and sat down here today. I don't know who you are. I don't know how you think. I don't know anything about you. You volunteered. I picked you. Here you are, right? So like, all right, it's hit or miss. It's hit because you're awesome. But you know what I mean? But in a job situation, it's hit or miss. And then, but we can test hire people, which is why we do internships, right? And then he's like, okay, this person breathes. They can breathe while they're typing and thinking at the same time. Great, we'll hire them. They show up on time, they're good to go, right? And then we'll train them, right? Like we trained you in the restaurant, right? This is kind of how it is. And then, or we'll hire recommended people. We'll do some kind of nepotism. You'll get a job because you know somebody, and then, that'll be it. And someone will say, hey, here we go, okay?